first grade. So what we're gonna do is that this week you guys are going to be starting a unit on a new nation, and it's in your packet. And so I hope that this week you'll be reading along with your parents on that. And as you have questions through the week, I hope you'll reach out and I will try to answer those. And I'm going to be sharing some books with you that I have here at home that I brought from school. And if we were all at school together, I'd be sharing those with you too as we go through our unit together. And I'm going to share those as we go. So I'll go ahead and start reading. Since you've read today with your parents about colonial times, I'm going to go ahead and share this book with you. I won't read all of it today, but I'll go ahead and start reading it with you. And then as we go through the week, we'll read a little bit together, okay? So here we go. It says, if you lived in colonial times. So think, this is like Pilgrim times, okay? Colonial times says, when were they? Colonial times were a long time ago. Colonial times began about 70 years after Columbus discovered America. They began when some settlers came from Spain to live in a colony in America. That was in the year 1565. Colonial times ended when the 13 English colonies became the United States. That was in the year 1776. This book does not tell about all the years that made up colonial times. It does not tell about all the 13 colonies. Look at the timeline at the bottom of the page. The part that is in color shows the years this book is about. Look at the map. The part that is in color is New England. This book is about life in the New England colonies. So the timeline is going to be about during these years, okay, from here to here, and then these are your states over here. Of course, at the time it was your 13 colonies, okay? Then they later became states, and that's the states of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, okay? And if you remember, when the Pilgrims landed, they landed at Plymouth Rock or Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and of course it wasn't a state then, but it's later called Massachusetts, which is in here. What was it like to live then? Did boys and girls in colonial times do the same things that you do today? Did they go to school? Did they have to worry about table manners? What did they do on Sundays? What games did they play? What happened if they got sick? This book tells you. It also tells you about their work, their food, their houses, and their clothes. This book will help you imagine what it was like to be a girl or boy in colonial days. And then it says the New England colonies later became the states of Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. What did colonial people look like? Well, when you look in the mirror, you see you. If you lived in colonial days, you would look the same as you do now, but you would wear your hair in a different way. And your clothes would be different too. Even baby clothes were different then. Clothes in colonial days had different names. If a baby fell, he fell right on his pudding. A pudding was a soft pillow worn around the baby's middle to keep him from getting hurt. When boys and girls were 6 years old, they stopped wearing baby clothes. From that time on, they dressed just like their mothers and fathers. Where did people buy their clothes? Most people in colonial days did not buy their clothes any place. Most people made all their own clothes. They planted flax to make linen thread. They raised sheep to get wool. Everybody in the family helped to make the clothes. Grandmother's job was to card the wool. The children gathered flowers and berries and roots to make the dyes to color the yarn. People wore bright colored clothes in colonial days, yellow, red, purple, and blue. Girls wore bright colored cloaks and hoods. Boys wore brightly colored stockings and caps. Girls and boys went to the woods and brought home armloads of goldenrod, birch bark to make yellow dye, pokeberry to make red, iris to make purple, logwood to make blue. The dye was boiled in the biggest pot in the house. The children stirred the dye with a long stick so it wouldn't get lumpy. Girls and women worked at the spinning wheel. Girls learned to spin when they were 6 years old. Younger sisters helped too. They learned how to knit as soon as they could hold a pair of knitting needles. Girls of 4 could knit stockings and caps. Boys and men did their share of work. Their job was to weave cloth on a loom. Then the women took the cloth and made clothes for the whole family, clothes for the whole family. All the sewing was done by hand. Was there a special time for making clothes? The time for making clothes was all the time. People worked whenever they could. When boys took the sheep to the fields, they took along a small loom. Then they could weave while they watched the sheep. When women went visiting, they brought their spinning wheels along. They tied the spinning wheel to the back of their horse. Then they could spin while they visited, and no one could say they were wasting their time. Look at them tying the spinning wheel to the back of their horse. And if you remember, what story did we read in our fairy tales? Remember Rumpelstiltskin, where they had the spinning wheels and they would spin? Okay, so there's your spinning wheel. How did they wear their hair? Girls kept their hair covered all the time, even in the house. They wore hats and hoods or kerchiefs. Boys had long hair. When wigs came into style, most men and even some boys in the big towns wore them. They wore wigs made of real hair and wigs made from the tails of cows. They wore horsehair wigs and goat hair wigs. They even wore wigs made of wire. Some men put white powder on their wigs. On a windy day, the powder blew away like snow. What did people eat? Corn, corn, and more corn. Boiled corn and roasted corn, corn ground into cornmeal and baked into corn cake and corn pudding. The Indians, or Native Americans, taught the people how to plant corn and how to cook it. If there was nothing else to eat, the people could always count on corn. But there were other things to eat. The people planted pumpkin and squash in the Indian or Native American way. The Indians showed them how to get maple sap from the maple trees. From the sap, they made maple sugar and maple syrup to sweeten their food. There were no grocery stores in the early colonial times, no places to buy food. The people planted vegetables and fruit seeds that came all the way from Europe. They planted beans and trained them to climb up the corn stalks. They cooked the beans into a mush or porridge, and they ate bean porridge hot, bean porridge cold, and bean porridge in the pot 9 days old. So they ate lots of beans, didn't they? The men and the boys fished. They came home with lobsters, clams, and many other kinds of fish. The men and the boys hunted. They came home with rabbits, squirrels, bear, and deer. Some families kept a few pigs so they could have bacon and pork and sausage. During the cool days before winter, everybody worked extra hard. They had to get all their food ready for the cold months ahead. Meat was smoked, salted, and pickled. Apples and pumpkins and peaches were peeled and sliced and hung up to dry. Later, they would be cooled into stews or made into jams. No one would be hungry. No one would be thirsty either. There were not many cows in early colonial days, so there was not much milk, and people thought water would make them sick. What did they drink? They drank cider made from apples and pears and peaches. Did children have to worry about table manners? When you sit down to eat with your family, you are allowed to talk. If you lived in colonial days, you had to keep quiet. Would we have trouble with that? You could not even sit down. You had to stand at the table all through the meal. Some of you probably might not mind that. When supper was good, you could not say so. When supper was bad, you could not say so either. That would be hard, wouldn't it? We would all want to say, thank you, thank you. I think we would want to say that to our families, don't you? You could not say a word at the table. Speak not was a rule to remember. There were so many rules to remember. Sing not, hum not, wriggle not was one rule. Has your mother ever said to you, don't take such big bites, don't make so much noise when you chew? They were the same rules in colonial days. All the rules were printed in a book of manners, and you had to learn them all. The book of manners said, stuff not thy mouth to fill thy cheeks. Make not a noise with thy tongue, thy lips, or breathe in thy eating or drinking. It was good manners to eat with your fingers. There were spoons, but there were no forks until later in colonial days. You used the same knife to cut your meat and to work with wood. That seems weird, doesn't it? Same knife you used to cut meat, to cut wood with, you used to cut your steak or your hamburger with. In many homes, one big pot was put on the table. Everyone put his spoon or his fingers into the pot to take out his food. Your plate was a wooden board called a trencher. You shared your trencher with a sister or a brother. You didn't have your own trencher. That would be too fancy. Did children go to school? And that's what we're going to learn tomorrow is, did children go to school? Like I said, I wasn't going to read all the book today. Now, for your what you were going to discuss with your parents, and I hope you did, because you were either listening to the recording of the New World today with your parents, or you were reading it, had your parents read it out loud to you today. That was what you were doing. But what you were going to discuss with your parents was if you could travel back in time, would you rather be one of the Native Americans, one of the sailors who traveled with Columbus, or one of the English colonists? That's what you're discussing with your parents today. And also you're discussing with them, why would you want to be one of those? And I hope you did discuss that with your parents and talk to them about the word of the day. And that was freedoms. Freedoms are the right to decide what you want to do or how you want to live. And I'm so glad that we have freedoms in our country, and so glad that we have the freedom to be able to make so many choices in our country. So I hope that you made those discussions with your parents today. So I will see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed our story that went along with that at colonial times. So see you guys. Bye.